In God we live and move and have our being. Amen. You can't miss it. Paul, the letter writer, the first interpreter of the Christian story, the Pharisee, the one who persecuted the saints, the one whose eyes had scales fall from them. Paul, you cannot unequivocally say, was a missionary. Now, what does that mean? He went out and told the world about Jesus. He went 4 times out of Joppa, out into the Mediterranean, of which I just saw for the first time in my life. And he went and told the stories of Jesus and invited the world to join him. But whenever I hear the word missionary, I get a little uneasy. It's not a word that is comfortable to me. You know, I live in a world where missionary does not always have a very good connotation or history. It's easy to think about those who were sent to make sure that Christians were made through force and through fear. You know the stories as I do. It was from the 16th century, the doctrine of discovery. And no matter where they went, that was their goal. There's a movie from 1986, one of my favorites, first of all, because the music is gorgeous, called The Mission. Some of you may have seen it, you may remember it. It is about a war in 1750 between the Portuguese and the Spanish over the lands of now Uruguay, Argentina, and Brazil. They went to conquer. And they fought over these lands far away from the European continent, and one allowed slavery and slave masters to steal people, the natives, to be sent far away, and one did not. The life we know is that life has affected us. By force and fear, the missionaries went. Paul stands before the Athenians today, and I love that. Now Paul, in another one of the stories, when he stands before people, he stands up and it says he makes a gesture and then he begins. I feel the same thing happened today. He stood in the Areopagus, thank you, Roger, and he began to teach. He began to tell a story of the living God. He was a dramatist. He certainly knew life and how to bring people into a conversation. He knew how to share love by reaching out through invitation and through love. For Paul, remember, was a Roman citizen. He was schooled in the Hellenistic thought, in the Greek world. He knew what was going on in the world in which he was in. It wasn't just the Jewish-Israeli world in Israel. And when those scales fell from his eyes, he still knew who he was anew. He was centered. He was grounded. And it is an unequivocal statement to say he understood God and he understood his call to love. Not everybody got it as he did. He stood there and he extended an arm of welcome and of invitation and an unconditional love without fear, without force, without even what we may think of today as a floppy Bible over heads in judgment and condemnation. That is not Paul. That is often what I fear when I hear the word missionary. We, as Americans and Western Europeans, started to come to terms with this inconsistency of how missionaries have lived and the gospel and Paul in the late 20th century. Hence, that movie became very popular. And there was a theologian, his name was David Bosch. He's from South Africa, I think, still, of course, within the world of Western thought. And he wrote about mission. He was known as a missiologist. It's one of those big words, right, that I don't like to throw around much, but he was a missiologist. And in a tome that I had to read in seminary with very small print, he dissected what it meant to be a missionary and mission within the church, within the Christian story. And he went on to tell the same stories of how the church has abused its responsibility. How the church did not always bring love, they brought fear, right? And sometimes they still do. But he also told us of God's way, which is not always man's way. As he named it in its Latin, it's the Missio Dei. It's the mission of God, not the mission of man. It is the way in which God invites God's people, grounded in who they are and in whose they are, to go into the world to deepen relationships with the world beyond our doors. Deepening, loving, embracing, not in fear, but in the unconditional love of Jesus beyond anything that is imaginable. Imagine that. A love that never ends. A love that is in everyone as the children of God. As that movie, The Mission, continues, you can imagine how it plays out. For the war, so for the princes and the kings and the pope and the prelates fight over this land in South America, there became a time that the other side won, and the slave masters were to come and take the natives by force. But the Jesuits were there. The Jesuits, those who had the most compassion, the most love, were to either continue to support and protect and to love the people of God in that place so that they would not be taken, or they too would be killed by the state for their faith. You can imagine how that tragic story ended. The narrator, one of those princes and prelates of the church long far away, said this: "So the Indians were brought into the everlasting mercy of God and the short-lived mercy of man." Paul the one whom they all read. And the same Paul we read today did not say that. His feet went in other ways. He told us of a mission of God, not a mission of man. Wow. What a way to live. Amen.